In this tutorial, what we're going to do is take a look at the next steps to take once we've finished soldering all our parts together. You can see in my little piece of PCB here, got my switch on, got my LEDs all in place, all the wires are twisted together, I'm good to go. One of the things that you're going to need to do before you can program your Genie chip is to insert the Genie chip. I've got mine just over here, this little thing just here. Look, a lot of people like to forget to actually connect that up and to plug that in, and if you do forget to put it in, it's not going to work very well. So make sure you see your teacher or the technician and get a Genie COH chip so that you can put that into the chip carrier just here. But don't connect it just yet. We want to make sure first of all, before we do plug this in, that the rest of our circuit's been soldered together correctly and we've got no electrical shorts. An electrical short circuit is where there's no physical connection between the positive and the negative end of the battery. Okay, over here. There's a connection between these two with no load, and the load is, you know, a resistor or a LED or a Genie chip or something like that, with no load in between them. When that happens and you connect positive and negative together, as much current as the power supply can give out, whether it's one of these or a battery, will be pulled from the positive end to the negative end as fast as possible, and that usually results in generating a lot of heat. That also applies if we've got this voltage regulator just here and we've got any electrical shorts after the voltage regulator, because what will happen is we're providing 5 volts straight out and pulling 5 volts straight back through the ground pin in here, again as fast as we possibly can. And again, that generates a lot of heat, especially on this metal tab that I've got back here. But we can use that heat to help us, you know, troubleshoot our circuit. So, given the choice of connecting it to a desktop power supply, which can pull current out up to 3 amps, and that's a lot, or a nice little square battery, a PP3 battery like this, which can probably deliver, I don't know, maybe 1 amp or something like that, it's much more sensible to use a battery for this initial stage of testing. So what we do first, before we put the actual Genie chip in, is I'm going to take my PP3 battery and I'm going to connect that to the circuit, okay, like so. Now, what I'm looking for is for absolutely nothing whatsoever to happen, okay? That's a good sign. What I also don't want to see is as I plug that in, what I'm going to do straight away is I'm going to just hold and pinch the 7805 regulator, this metal bit on the back. It's a heatsink, it's designed to output heat. I'm just going to hold that in my fingers, and I'm going to hold that there for about 10-15 seconds. Now, if you've got a problem in your circuit board, okay, then this is where you're going to find out about it, because the most common problem is an electrical short like we talked about. And if this starts to get warm in your fingers, okay, and obviously your fingers are going to, holding it itself is going to warm up a little bit, but if this gets hot, as in hot to touch, and again you'll know it, then what you need to do is to disconnect the battery, nice and quick, because you don't want to blow this up. It won't blow up, but it'll just break. You want to disconnect that straight away. If it doesn't get hot after about sort of 30 seconds, then we're good, and we can move on to the next stage. Let's just for a second pause and imagine that it was getting hot. What do you need to do? Well, you need to flip your board over upside down, like I've got mine just here, and you need to carefully do a visual inspection of all those little soldered joints that you've got. And you need to look and to decide if any of them are touching. You know, so for example, if on my 7805 regulator, if the input soldering point was connected to the middle one, the reference soldering point, and there was a little accidental solder bridge, as we call it, between those two, or if some of these here were joined together. If that's the case, you'll need to get in, desolder them, and resolder them. You could also use a multimeter as well, and your teacher can perhaps help you with that, or you might remember how to do it based on the previous project that you've done. So once you've got that done, and you can plug this in and it doesn't get hot, it's time to get hold of our Genie chip. With your Genie chip, when you hold it in your fingers and you take a look at it, what you'll notice, just try to sort of stand that up so you can see it, what you'll notice is there's a little notch cut out of one end at the top, okay? The little notch is there so that you can decide which pin of the Genie chip is pin number 1, okay? So that notch just in the video, there's also a little blob up in the top corner as well, okay? And again, you don't really see it very well here. There you go, you can see it there a little bit. And that also tells you that's pin number 1, okay? The little notch in here needs to line up with the little notch in your chip carrier just here, which should be, if you installed it the right way up, pointing up towards the download socket. If you installed this upside down, don't panic, it's not the end of the world, but just make sure that when you do install your Genie chip that it goes in with the little notch facing up towards this download socket here. When they manufacture these chips, they tend to manufacture them with the legs on the chips sort of splayed out slightly. They're kind of like that, and what we need is for them to be like that instead, okay? So they're like that, they need to be like that. The way that we can straighten them out is to grab something flat, fingers by the way are not flat, like a ruler, works pretty good, or I've got another piece of PCB just here. lay the Genie chip on its side as best you can, or put your fingers in and hold it on its side, and then very, very gently get your flat surface and just get on the top of it and sort of push it down a bit to try and encourage the pins to sit a little bit flatter. I've actually got a slight bend in one of my pins here. Okay, again, it's not the end of the world. I've just got to keep an eye on that when I insert it into the chip socket. Okay, so let's get that Genie chip put in place. So I'm making sure I've got it the right way up. Yes, I have. Get hold of it, stick it in there a bit like that, and gently, gently, gently sort of rock it and try and get it to sit in the chip carrier. Here we go. That's looking good. I'm just going to push that in place, and once it's in, push it in quite firmly, and it's going to sit and look kind of like I've got just here once it's in. A lot of people don't push these in firmly enough, and you end up where you've got a huge big gap between the chip and the chip carrier. Okay, but that's in there nice and firmly, so that's in there properly now. So once the chip's in, the next thing to do is to connect it back up to your battery again. Okay, get a little blink like that. That's, oh sorry, mine's already programmed to say, yeah, mine's going to stay lit up. But on yours, you'll probably get an initial little blink, maybe, and then it'll go blank and it'll stay with everything turned off. So do ignore the fact that on mine, they're all turned on. Mine's programmed at the moment already straight away. Okay, so don't worry about that. Anyway, once that's plugged in, okay, and you've got nothing turned on, what I'd then like you to do is to have another pinch on the back of that heatsink on the 7055 regulator and see if that gets hot. No, mine feels pretty good. Put your finger on top of the Genie chip, see if that gets hot. If that gets hot, to get the power off it straight away, and again you'll need to go on a bit of a troubleshoot to go and check everything. But as long as everything's staying cool and you've got no problem, then we're ready to move to the next stage, which is to plug it into the computer so we can actually test properly everything and to check all our various inputs and outputs. So what you'll then need to do is to grab one of the download cables, okay, which you can get. It's got a headphone socket on one end, like you see here, and the other end's got a USB port on it. What you need to do is you'll need to make sure you've got a power supply, like a battery, and you'll plug one end of the download cable into the socket, like so. Make sure it goes all the way in. A lot of people leave them like that, but it's got to be clicked in place. Connect the other end up to the power, okay, and then go and take it over to the computer, and, oops, okay, just unplug that again. Take it over to the computer while yours is all plugged in, and then plug the USB end into the PC, okay. And then what we'll do is we'll go and have a look at what happens over on the computer end, so you can start to test it.